Welcome everyone. In this we are going to discuss OSI models or OSI reference. So a point to be noted here, this topic I have divided into two different subtopics. In this two videos will be there. One is part 1 and another part 2. So this is part 1, part 2 I will cover in this. So let's get started. So OSI stands for Open System Interconnections. Now, why this OSI, the major point, why we use this, let's try to understand. So, the very first point you need to remember is that why OSI needed. It's like, consider you have a computers and this PCs is basically, let's say, Dell company. Let's say you have got another and this is basically, let's say, your B and it is SP. So what happens before this OSI model, the communication between two different vendor was, restricted. You won't be able to share any kind of information. So it's like if you have the two different or maybe different vendor devices, it is not at all possible to have any kind of communication here. And this was the monopoly before this OSI itself. So what OSI does? OSI is all about, it is going to allow the communications between two different vendor devices all about. But how? For sure there are different points to remember in this. But the major point why OSI was created about just to allow the communications between two different vendor or different vendor devices can communicate to each other, this OSI has needed. Let's get started. OSI. So OSI is basically your one of the standard reference model which is basically developed by the ISO, International Organizations for Standardization, in 1984. This is also called as the reference model, which is basically explains the how the data is transferred from one device to another device. It's like OSI will break down the functions of your networking so that you can understand how the communications is possible from one device to another device. Make sure it is not at all any kind of physical layer, but it is very helpful to understand that how data is being transferred from one PC to another PC. Couple of major points to remember is this. First of all is this. It helps, or you can say it breaks down the network function so that you can understand how the network function works at every point between the devices, so that it's become easiest to understand your complete network process. This is first point. How it is going to break down the functions? Because it is having the number of layer, it has the 7 layers which consist of different roles and responsibility. We will discuss that in detail in this. Another point, a very important point is it gives the standardization so that the different vendor can go ahead and communicate to each other. Major point also is this. OSI model consists of your 7 layers. Each layer has the specific networking functions. Say this. This is what your different layers. So you have the application layer, presentation layer, session layer, transport, network, data link, and physical layer. So generally what we consider physical layer as layer 1, and then layer 2, layer 3, like this. This is your layer 7 generally. Now make sure these 3 layers are basically considered as the user support layer or software layer. Generally network engineers do not deal with the application, presentation, and session. This is all about the software people. Next, these 3 layers, network, data link, and physical, these 3 layers are considered as network support layer or hardware layer. Then this network support layer is basically deals by the network administrator. Many times you will find the layer 1, layer 2, and layer 3, this discussion during your routing and switching part. So as you can say, for the network engineer, these 3 layers are majorly useful, which breaks down your complete networking function. Next you have the transport layer, which is basically considered as the heart of OSI layer or core of the OSI layer, which is basically going to allow the communications between your user support layer and network support layer, or in simple term, your upper layer to down layers like software and hardware. So make sure this is your heart of your OSI layer, your transport layer. Now, so we will start one by one, and we will see that the specific function of each and every, each and every layers here. So the very first thing start with your OSI is your application layer. Say for example, being as an end user, let's say I want to access the, let's say internet. So if you want to access the internet, you need to have the client application first, like Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, or maybe Microsoft Edge browser. And that application, that a client application, will be basically considered as the application layer part. Say this. The application layer provides the interface between user application and the network. Very, very important point. As I said, to access internet or to access any, services in the IT world, basically you require some kind of applications, and that applications are basically useful to enable the communications or interface between your users and networks. That is nothing but your application layer job. Make sure your application layer which is going to interact with your application protocols. Fine. Now make sure we have the many use cases that you can say in the application layer. For example, you can go ahead and use the file services to transfer or store or maybe upload your data by using the protocols like FTP or TFTP. FTP stands for file transfer protocol, TFTP trivial file transfer protocols. So this is application service. You can have the print services. As we discussed, multiple users can go ahead and access the shared printer in your network at the same time. It's all about multiple user can access the same printer at the same time to print out. You doesn't need to connect the printers directly to each and every users. Next, your message services, as we are using it in daily life. Message services, it's like you can go ahead, transfer mails or receive your mails based on your requirements from one user to another by using the protocols like SMTP, POP or IMAP. You can have the protocols like application services, is all about you can go ahead and share the applications throughout the networks and enable the special services to perform the specific task. For example, DNS or DSCP can be your application services under application layer. Also, remote services. You guys have the daily to daily expression with the telnet and SSH, because we generally use this telnet and SSH to access your remote devices. So remote services is all about remotely accessing the network devices for easy management, configuration and troubleshooting by using the protocols like telnet and SSH. Comes under application services. Last but not the least is your web services, which I took the examples of your browser, right? Sharing or exchanging the web page information over the network is nothing but your web services, and it is your all about HTTP and HTTPS communications. So in simple term, what is application layer? Application layer provides the interface between user application and the network. It is the interface layer in simple term, you can call it as. Fine. Now next comes your presentation layer. Make sure whenever you are using any kind of applications, there must be some proper format to display that particular data to you. For example, you have some images, you have some videos, you have some audios, you have some document. Definitely there should be some extension for each and every kind of files, then only you will be able to view, and that is basically formatted by your presentation layer. See, read this. It is responsible for defining the standard format to the data, and it is responsible to go ahead and perform the data compatibility based on the application itself. So make sure presentation layer is basically going to present your data into the compatible format so that your applications will be able to read the same. by doing the encapsulation and decapsulation. For example, encoding and decoding is all about defining the format is your encoding, and encryption to provide the security, compression to provide the compression. So couple of examples to understand that the file extension is like for image you can have JPEG, for videos, for language, for audio you can see here, right? So presentation layer is all about to present the data in which format your application can show. Is nothing but for videos, MP4 or maybe HD format, for image your JPEG, GIF, different kind of formats you have. Now next we have this session layer. Make sure session layer is all about to establish the communication from your client to the server. For example, this is my computer and I can access the internet right now, Google. So first of all my computer has to establish the communication here to the Google server, then only you will be able to exchange the information from here to here. So who is responsible to create, maintain or terminate the session is all about your session layer. See this in detail. So starting with this. So the primary function of your session layer includes the establishment and maintenance of communication session between your network host is very important. It's all about to enable the connection, to maintain the connection, to terminate the connection. Your session layer is responsible. See this. Managing multiple sessions is very important for a particular client. For example, let's say by using my single computer I will be able to access number of websites. Let's say I can open the google.com, facebook.com, amazon.com, like that, flipkart.com. So make sure you can go ahead and access the multiple website at the same time from a single browser. And for each and every sessions, for example Facebook, Amazon, Google and other, for each and every connections, your computer is going to assign something known as session ID, and make sure each client connection is called as session, and a server can maintain the thousands of sessions at the same time. This is very important. One of the major point to remember, which I say, assignment of your session ID is nothing but your session is the job of your operating system itself. And the major point to remember in this, as I discussed, you have the Facebook, you have Gmail and Amazon and other services which you are accessing at the same time, is nothing but because of this feature itself, session multiplexing. You know what? This feature allows the single IP addresses to use the multiple services at the same time, which means a user can have the multiple website at the same time, right? This is what, let's say you have opened the browser, this is you have opened Facebook, here you have opened the Amazon, here you have opened Google, here you have opened some other. So it's like the computer is same, browser is same, but for every tab you have the separate traffic. This is separated by the session multiplexing. It's like single IP address can be used to access the multiple services at the same time. That's very important to understand. Now, one more major point to remember, this layer is also responsible to perform the dial-up control. It's all about how the devices can go ahead and coordinate to each other. It's like simplex or hop duplex or full duplex. It's like you are just sending the information, or you are sending the information and receiving the information one by one, or you are sending and receiving at the same time. That is basically considered as dial-up control, which is again comes under your session layer itself. Last but not the least, which you need to remember in this particular session is this. Read this. Why session layer? This session layer is responsible for establishing, maintaining and terminating your session itself between your server and client, or between your machines. So in this videos we have discussed about the three different layers. Is about application layer, then we discuss about presentation, then we have discussed about session layer in this. Now we will discuss about other layers like transport and all other in part 2 after this. So that's it for this particular. Thank you. See